people have called it narrative poetry. Some other people have talked about it in different lights. But what happens is that whatever the genre of the metamorphosis is, we have to realize that the metamorphosis is very, very comprehensive in its chronology. It is very thorough and vivid in its span, in covering its span from the beginning of the creation till the death of Julius Caesar, which occurred just 1 year before Ovid's birth. And it is a work of universal history. Now, in spite of its unbroken chronology, there can be four narrative patterns that can be found in this poem. And the critic Brooks Otis has found this. He says, Book 1 till the end of Book 2, that is lines 875, is basically the Divine Comedy. Book 3 to Book 6 till line 400 is the Tale of the Avenging Gods. Book 6, lines 401 to Book 9, the end of Book 9, say line 795, is dealing with the pathos of love. And Book 12 to Book 15, the end, that is line 879, is Rome and the deified ruler. Now, Ovid showed a keen interest in history, in myth, in folk tales, in fairy tales. And before I go into Book 3, let me talk a little bit about what each of the books contain. Now, the first book, Book 1, deals with the creation, the ages of mankind, the flood, the story of Deucalion and Pyrrha, the story of Apollo and Daphne, the story of Io, and the story of Phaeton. Book 2 continues the story of Phaeton, then talks about Callisto, the raven and the crow, the story of Ocyri, Mercury, and Bacchus, not Bacchus, Bacchus, the envy of Aglaurus, Jupiter and Europa. Book 3 deals with Cadmus, Diana and Actaeon, Semele and the birth of Bacchus, Tiresias, the story of Narcissus and Echo, and the story of Pentheus and Bacchus. This is the book that is there in your syllabus, and we will be dealing with this book in greater detail as we come to this book. Book 4 deals with the daughters of Minyas, the story of Pyramus and Thisbe, Mars and Venus, the sun in love, that is the story of Leucothoe and Clytie, the story of Salamakis and Hermaphroditus, the daughters of Minyas transformed, also the story of Athamas and Ino, the transformation of Cadmus, Perseus, and Andromeda. Book 5 deals with Perseus's fight in the palace of Cepheus. Minerva meets the Muses on Helicon, the rape of Proserpina, Arethusa, and Triptolemus. Book 6 deals with Arachne, Niobe, the Lycian peasants, Marsyas, Pelops, Tereus, Procne, and Philomela, Boreas and Oreithia. Book 7 deals with Medea and Jason, Medea and Aeson, Medea and Peleus, Theseus, Minos, Eseus, the plague of Aegina, the Myrmidons, Cephalus, and Procris. Book 8 deals with Scylla and Minos, the Minotaur, Daedalus and Icarus, Perdix and Meleager, and the Caledonian boar, the story of Althea and Meleager, the story of Achilles and Nymphs, the story of Philemon and Baucis, and the story of Erysichthon and his daughters. Book 9 deals with Achilles and Hercules, the story of Hercules, the story of Nessus, the story of Deianira, and the story of the death of the apotheosis of Hercules, the birth of Hercules, Dryope's story, Iolaus' story, and the sons of Caliro's story, Bibel's story, Ephesus' story, and Ianthus' story. Book 10. I'm sorry I'm taking too much time. I know you are not really interested in knowing what happens in so many tales, but I'm just giving you an idea that what great array of stories are there in this text. So, book 10, please bear with me for a little. We have reached till book 10. Book 15 will come very soon. Book 10 comes with book 10 comes with Orpheus and Eurydice, Cypressius, Ganymede, Hyacinth, Pygmalion, Myra, Venus and Adonis, Atlanta. Book 11 comes with the death of Orpheus, the story of Midas, the foundation and destruction of Troy, Peleus and Thetis, Didalion, the cattle of Peleus, Ceyx and Alcyone, and Isis. Book 12, Book 11 deals with the death of Orpheus. Book 12 deals with the expedition against Troy, Achilles and sickness, Caenis, the battle of Lapids and centaurs, Nestor and Hercules, the death of Achilles. Book 13 deals with Ajax, Ulysses, and the arms of Achilles. The fall of Troy, Hecuba, Polyxena and Polydorus, Memnon, the pilgrimage of Aeneas, Acis and Galatea, Scylla and Glaucus. Book 14 deals with Scylla and Glaucus. Once again, it's continued. The pilgrimage of Aeneas is also continued. The island of Circe, Picus and Cannons, the triumph and apotheosis of Aeneas, Pomona and Vertumnus, legends of early Rome, the apotheosis of Romulus. Book 15 deals with Numa and the foundation of Croton, the doctrine of Pythagoras, the death of Numa, Hippolytus, Cyprus, Asclepius, the apotheosis of Julius Caesar, and finally comes the epilogue. So look, I did not take too much time. So now, let us talk a little bit about book 3 now, and then we shall go into the theme of Metamorphosis. We will be looking at the title of Metamorphosis and so on and so forth. All right. So we shall be doing all of that. But first, I want to look at Metamorphosis, the third book. Okay. What happens in the third book? Now, look, why I wanted to deal with Metamorphosis. Every book is very important. Now, look what happens. When Jupiter arrives at Crete, still carrying the Princess Europa, he abandons his bull shape and turns back into his godlike stature. At the same time, King Agenor, whose daughter had just been carried off, sends Cadmus, his son, to bring her back. Cadmus wanders over the entire world but cannot find his missing sister. Eventually, Cadmus realizes that his search is futile, but knowing that he cannot go home without fulfilling his duty, he asks the oracle of Apollo what he should do. Now, the oracle of Apollo is a major figure who keeps on uh, reappearing throughout your ancient European classics paper. Now you see nowadays, just like we have the Jyotshis, the astrologers, and the seers. Back in those days, they had the oracle of Apollo, or the oracle whose duty it was to kind of look into the future and tell that what is going to happen. And usually, since the oracle had divine insight, so it was believed that whatever the oracle is saying is true. All right. So this was the in general belief back in those days, and therefore you see uh, the oracle of Apollo becomes very very important. All right. So please do not get confused when the oracle of Apollo comes into being. And I was thinking that I would provide you with the PDF of which book contains what. Now, I will be talking about these. Okay. So, look, book 3 contains 6 stories. Okay. The stories of Cadmus, Actaeon, Semele, Tiresias, Narcissus, and Echo. Narcissus and Echo, and the story of Pentheus and Bacchus. Now, what happens is that we were discussing the tale. So let's go back to the tale. So when Jupiter arrives at Crete, he takes his godlike form and he's still carrying the princess Europa. And King Agenor, whose daughter is Europa, is worried about his daughter. And so he sends his son, Cadmus, to find his lost sister. Now, Cadmus cannot find his sister and Cadmus cannot go home as well. So, Cadmus asks the oracle of Apollo regarding what should he do. The oracle tells Cadmus to keep an eye out for a heifer. A heifer is a female cow which is standing alone. Now, there is one more condition, that such a cow has never pulled a plow. And then the oracle said that Cadmus should follow this heifer, and wherever she stops to rest, that is where he should found a settlement. He should create his kingdom over there. And he is instructed to call that region Betia, Boeotia. Now, interestingly, the word Betia actually refers to a region in Greece, and it comes from it actually resembles the the Latin word for cow, which is bos, bos. Now, the English word bovine is related to it, as you all know. Now, when Cadmus leaves the shrine, he surely meets such a heifer, which is matching the description of the oracle, and the heifer was walking by. So he follows the heifer, and after some time, it starts bellowing and lies down in the grass. And Cadmus knows for sure that this is the right spot. At this point, the appropriate thing to do is offer a sacrifice to Jupiter. For this, however, he would need some fresh spring water. And basically, he sends his men into the forest to find some water. But unfortunately, these men go to a cave to find water, and in that cave lurks a giant snake. And the snake is sacred to the god of war, whose name is Mars. And this snake kills all of Cadmus's men. Now, by the time it's noon, Cadmus is wondering that where are all his men? And finally, he loses his patience and goes in search of all of them. And when he goes near the cave, he sees a rather gruesome scene. That is, he sees that the mutilated bodies of his fellow warriors are lying on the ground, and Cadmus becomes angry, so he battles the snake and eventually kills it. Now, after killing the snake, Cadmus pins his spear in the snake and hangs the spear against an oak tree. Now, while Cadmus is staring at the snake, he hears a voice calling out. And the voice says, "What do you think you are staring at? Don't you know that you will also become a snake one day?" And right at this moment, all of a sudden, the goddess Minerva appears and she tells him to plow the ground and plant the snake's seed in the furrows, that is the ground, the tilled ground. And he follows the command. And when he is done plowing the teeth of the snake into the ground, the teeth germinate into a race of warriors who rise out of the soil. And for no apparent reason, these warriors start fighting amongst themselves, killing each other. And they go on killing each other until only 5 warriors are left. And these 5 men make peace with each other. And now Ovid tells us that Cadmus ended up having a very happy life where he had a beautiful wife, children, and so on and so forth. But simultaneously, he reminds us that we should not consider a man to be happy until the moment that he is dead. This is also the moral that we get from Oedipus the King by Sophocles. Now, Ovid also tells us that in Cadmus's case, the trouble started when his grandson Actaeon was turned into a stag. A stag means a male deer. Now, there is a time jump, a time leap, a skipping of several years, and we are in a first forward motion where we see that Ovid is now telling us the tale of Actaeon. So, one fine day, young Actaeon and his fellow men went on hunting in the forest. And in their hunt, they kill many, many animals, so much so that the ground is almost stained with blood. And this is a sport for them. Now, nearby, there is a valley which has a cave in it. And in that cave, there is a spring where Diana, the goddess of purity or the goddess of chastity, the goddess of moon, is taking a bath with her nymphs, with her fellow attendants. Now, usually Diana takes her baths over there, and this day Diana has decided to take her bath over there at the spring. And Actaeon, in his search for wild animals, has wandered off and has come across uh, the cave. And what happens is that during that time, Diana is absolutely naked with her fellow attendants, and they are splashing water, they are taking their shower, And right at this moment, Actaeon enters. And Diana, who is the goddess of chastity, is very much offended by this. And she splashes a little water on Actaeon and casts her magic charm. And in that instant, Actaeon is transformed into a stag, that is a male deer. And Actaeon races out of the cave. But what happens is that Actaeon, who was a hunter, was carrying with him some hunting dogs. And these dogs sniff up his scent. So what happens is that they pick up his scent and they really don't know who this is. They think that this is a male deer. And his hounds catch up to him and they start gnawing at him. They start mauling him, flesh from the bones, and so on and so forth. And Actaeon's friends, they are joyous that they have found a good prey, but they are missing Actaeon. That where is he? He is missing out on all the good action. And they cheer on the dogs. Eventually, Actaeon the deer dies from his wounds. Now, when Juno, the queen of the gods, the wife of Jupiter, hears about this, she is glad. She is pleased. She is very, very jovial as long as a descendant of King Agenor, who was the father of Europa, whom Jupiter had carried away a long time ago. So long as any of his descendants is suffering, basically, Juno is happy. Why? Because Cadmus was the son of Agenor and Actaeon was the grandson of Cadmus. So that family line continues. But during this time, Juno gets a bad news. It turns out that Jupiter is back to his old tricks, and this time he is basically ignoring her and going for the mortal, the Theban princess, the princess of Thebes, whose name is Semele, and Semele. And what happens is that Semele is pregnant. Now, Juno considers this to be a grave transgression and wants to punish her husband for this. But look, he is the king of the gods. He is the most powerful god in the Greek culture. Taking a revenge on such a god by power, by force, by might is very difficult. So instead, what does Juno do? She picks up the easy target, Semele herself. So she decides that she will be taking out all her anger on Semele. And so she goes down to Thebes. She takes the disguise of a nurse and she becomes Semele's nurse called Beroe. And in this shape, she asks Semele that how she really knows that Jupiter is the father of the child. That is, how did she know that it was Jupiter who got her pregnant? And she also says that Jupiter sleeps with Juno and he appears in his divine glory. So what does Juno do? Juno asks Semele that why don't you ask for the same treatment? If actually Jupiter is the father of the child, then he should give an equal treatment to Semele as his wedded wife Juno. And Semele finds good logic in this argument. So the next time that Jupiter visits him, she says, all right, I want a gift. And Jupiter, in his affection for Semele, says, all right, by river Styx, I promise whatever you ask for, I will fulfill it. And she basically repeats what exactly Juno told her. And he says And she says that, why don't you make love to me? Since you are so intent on making love to me, since you are so intent on making me pregnant with your baby, then why don't you make me the queen of gods and then make love with me? But Jupiter is now in a fix. He does not want to comply because he knows Juno is there. So, but he's also bound by his own oath. So, what happens is that he does as he is told, and Simile is incinerated. Now, when Jupiter embraces Semele, she is incinerated by his divine glory. Now, Ovid tells us that the child out of this union, out of the wedlock, was extracted from her womb, and Jupiter implanted the embryo in his thighs. And when the right time came, the child was born, and this child is called Bacchus, who is the god of wine and revelry. A little time passes, and Jupiter is on Mount Olympus with his wife Juno. And maybe it was Simile's request reminding him of his love life with Juno, or maybe just he was drunk with the nectar that he was drinking. Whatever the cause, Jupiter is now basically interested to know that who gets more pleasure in the act of union, in the act of sexuality, in the act of uh, fornication or intercourse. Who gets the more pleasure? Is it the man or the woman? And Jupiter thinks that it is the woman who gets more pleasure. But Juno disagrees, and Jupiter is bent on making Juno agree with him. So they decide to ask a man named Tiresias, because Tiresias, due to a curse, had been both a man and a woman. So, what is the story behind this? Let us talk about Tiresias a bit. So, one day Tiresias was walking in the forest and he saw two snakes copulating. For some reason, he beat the snakes with his stick, and out of the curse from the snakes, he was transformed into a woman. 8 years later, he once again saw two snakes copulating, and he repeated the same act of hitting them with a stick, and he was transformed, or rather, she was transformed back into a man. So, Tiresias has had both the experiences as a man, as being a man, and a woman. So, when Tiresias shows up, he's asked the question. And what does Tiresias do? He sides up with Jupiter. That is, women enjoy the act of intercourse more than men do. But Juno is angry because Tiresias does not.